Imagine walking through the streets of 17th century London and seeing crowds gathered around a bonfire, but they aren't burning books or effigies, they are burning dresses. Simply wearing this specific floral fabric in public had become a punishable crime. At the time, the average European wardrobe was incredibly dull. If you weren't royalty, you were largely limited to heavy, scratchy wool or plain linen. These materials did more than just keep people warm. They acted as a visual code for the social hierarchy. You could tell exactly where someone stood in the community just by the drabness of their coat. Then, a new material arrived on the docks, calico. It was a brightly dyed, lightweight cotton from India. Suddenly, a merchant's wife could afford a dress that rivaled the aesthetic of an aristocrat's silk gown. For a fraction of the cost, anyone could wear bright, intricate patterns that were previously reserved for the elite. This accessibility created a sartorial crisis. For the first time, attire could no longer reliably signal a person's rank, making the traditional social order significantly harder to distinguish and enforce at a glance. To find the source of this disruption, we look to the western coastline of the Indian subcontinent. On the Malabar coast sits Calicut, or Kozhikode. Europeans named the fabric after this city, where they first acquired it in bulk. The true innovation lay in the hands of the makers. Artisans from the Chaliya community utilized hand-loom weaving techniques that European workers could not replicate. Their inherited technical knowledge allowed them to produce a consistency and fineness that was unmatched in the West. Authentic calico was a durable, unbleached cotton that remained breathable in heat. Crucially, the raw fibers accepted natural vegetable dyes like indigo and madder, which produced vivid, color-fast patterns that wouldn't fade or bleed when washed. When the East India Company introduced this technologically superior product into a market dominated by heavy English wool, it created the perfect conditions for a total economic shift. The fabric took over European wardrobes and homes. It was used for everything from wall hangings and curtains to daily apparel, becoming so integrated into the culture that the first year of marriage became known as a calico wedding. This popularity came at a direct cost to domestic wool and silk weavers. As demand for Indian cotton soared, British looms sat idle. The resulting mass unemployment triggered violent unrest, including the Spitalfields riots, where weavers attacked anyone seen wearing the imported prints. Parliament's intervention was absolute. The Calico Acts of 1700 and 1721 criminalized the entire trade, banning the import, the sale, and even the public wearing of printed Indian cottons within Great Britain. This was protectionism in its purest form. The government outlawing a superior foreign competitor to save a failing domestic industry. On this chart, you can see the spike in imports and the corresponding drop in wool sales, followed by the legislative hammer that forced calico sales to zero. Rather than adapting to the shifting global market, the British government chose to make the public's fashion preferences a crime. The ban had a massive unintended consequence. While Parliament had cut off the legal supply of finished Indian cloth, the consumer demand for cotton remained as high as ever. British entrepreneurs realized they could bypass the law by importing raw cotton and manufacturing the fabric themselves. If they could produce the cloth domestically, they would own the entire market. But there was a problem. British workers lacked the specialized manual weaving skills that the Chaliyas in Kerala had perfected over centuries. They simply couldn't spin or weave cotton by hand with enough speed or quality to be profitable. To make up for this lack of human skill, they turned to machines. Inventors developed the spinning jenny and the water frame, mechanical solutions designed to automate the work of the Indian weavers at a massive scale. The quest to mimic a single Indian textile drove the transition from human artistry to the high-speed mechanical output that characterized the early Industrial Revolution. It took decades for the technology to mature. Only in 1774, once British factories were automated enough to outproduce Indian handlooms on both price and volume, did Parliament finally repeal the Calico Acts. The era of the artisan was replaced by the era of the factory. These massive steam-powered industrial mills could flood the global market with cheap, printed copies of the original Indian designs. This led to a total reversal of global trade. India was systematically de-industrialized. The subcontinent stopped weaving its own cloth, becoming a mere exporter of raw cotton to feed British mills, only to have finished machine-made goods sold back. The British textile industry didn't just emerge through a move to a free market. It was built behind decades of legal walls that allowed factories to catch up to and eventually dismantle the original innovators. The 18th century obsession with cheap, rapid manufacturing created the blueprint for today's global market, where disposable clothing is produced at a scale and speed that the original Indian weavers could simply never have imagined. The cost of that speed is visible today in Kozhikode. Authentic, hand-woven calico has almost completely vanished from the Malabar coast, existing now as a historical reference rather than a living craft. Our modern world of automated abundance was built on a fierce desire to replicate and ultimately replace the quiet artistry of a small weaving community. Thanks for watching Roots of Routine. If you want to see the histories hidden in the objects you use every day, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next one.